Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Kesubos Daf Kuf, Kesubos 100. We're up to the Daf Kuf on Kesubos, and we're going to start on the bottom of Tzadi Tes Amud Beis 99b at the Mishnah. And the Mishnah tells us, Shum Hadayanim, let's say the court does an evaluation of the property, and before they sell it on behalf of the heirs or before the property is sold, and the court either undervalues it or overvalues it, if they overvalue it or undervalue it by a sixth, then the sale is canceled. Whereas Rav Shimon Gamliel says, Machran Kayam, they say that the sale is valid. So, because Rav Shimon Gamliel's logic is Im Kain Makoch Bezin Yafeh. If we're not going to allow the sale to be valid, what's the whole power of the Bezin in the first place? I'm also Igeres Bikores Binean, but if they make a proclamation, if they make a achraza, and they, let's say, take out ads in the newspaper, say we're selling this property, even if they were overcharged for something that was worth 100, they sold it for 200, or something that was worth 200, they sold it for 100. It's a valid sale because there they did a public proclamation. So the Gemara says, the Gemara asks the following question: Shliach Kanan, who is the agent compared to on top of 100A? Because we had seen now that at Bezdin, if it's more than 1/6, if it's 1/6 or more, it's canceled. Whereas the widow, we had seen earlier that if it was even off by a dinar, she sold something for 101 mana of a dinar, when it was really only worth a mana, that it was canceled. So is an agent comparable to a widow for whom even if it's a little bit off, it's canceled? Or is the agent comparable to a bezdin for whom we say that you can be off by 1/6? So therefore, the Gemara says, Rava says, the name of Rav Nachman, Shliach Kedayanin. Rava says that, Rav Nachman says that an agent is like a dayan, you could be off by up to 1/6. And Rav Shmuel Bar Bisna says in the name of Rav Nachman Kalmana that an agent is like a widow, that even a little bit off, it's canceled. Rav Amar Rav Nachman, that Rava's position like Rav Nachman is Shliach Kedayanin, that the agent is like the judge, Ma Dayanin, because an agent is similar to a judge. Because just like a judge, just like a judge doesn't sell it for himself, also an agent doesn't sell it for himself. The agent sells it for the person who appoints him, and so therefore you give him a little bit of more leeway. This excludes the case of the widow, who she sells it for her. She sells it she sells it for herself. Whereas Rav Shmuel Bar Bisna says in the name of Rav Nachman, Rav Shmuel Bar Bisna says in the name of Rav Nachman that an agent is like a widow, because Ma'amana Yechidah, just like an agent is acting as an individual, so too Ma'amana Yechidah, so like a widow is acting as an individual, so too an agent is acting like an individual. Fuke Bezdin the Rabbim. This comes to exclude the case of the court, which is basically Fuke Bezdin the Rabbim. Exclude the case of the Bezdin, which is Rabbim, which is a public decision. And so therefore we're going to say that the agent is more similar to the widow. The halacha is the agent is like the widow, meaning to say that even a little bit off, it's canceled. The Gemara says, well, if that's the case, why is it different than the Mishnah in Trumos, which we actually quoted yesterday? What about the Mishnah in Trumos, where a person says, somebody says to his agent, go out with Torah, go out and take a truma for me. Toram Kedas Ba'abayis. The agent is supposed to do what he thinks that the owner would have wanted. He doesn't know what the owner would have wanted. Toram Bebeinonis. Then he takes the average amount, which is Echad Michamishim. That when you give truma, the biblical amount is not listed. Rabbinically, the halacha is you give either 1/40th, 1/50th, or 1/60th. The generous gives 1/40th. the average gives 1/50th, and the stingy gives 1/60th. So we say if you don't know the amount of what the Baal Bayis wanted to do, you give 1/50th. Piches asara or hosif asara. But if you go up or down 10, trumas or truma. We say it's a valid truma, even though the agent made a mistake. He didn't know what the owner wanted, and he went up or down by 10% from what he would have wanted. We're still going to say it's a valid truma, and we don't cancel it. So the Gemara says, what's the distinction? Well, the distinction is Hasam Kimin Ika Torah Ayin Ra, Ika Torah Ayin Yafa. There are some people who give with an Ayin Ra, they give 1/60th, and some people give with an Ayin Yafa, they give 1/40th. He could say, well, this is not a mistake. This is how I evaluated you, that you would have wanted to give it. In our case here, the agent has made a mistake. Ta'usahu, the agent has made a mistake, and so therefore, since the agent made a mistake, the transaction is canceled. I wouldn't have wanted you to cancel the transaction. I didn't want you to make a mistake, and so therefore the transaction is canceled. Rav Huna says the name of Bar Chanina says the name of Rav Nachman. The law is like the Chachamim that a mistake up to 1/6 by a court is okay, but 1/6 or more, the transaction is canceled. So the Gemara says, I must be Rav Nachman doesn't hold according to this opinion of Rav Huna Bar Chanina. Rav Nachman doesn't hold by what Rashbag says, which is Imkei Makoch Bezin Yafa. What's the power of the court? So the Gemara says, V'leislei Rav Nachman Makoch Bezin Yafa. Does Rav Nachman not hold by this principle? What's the power of the court? V'amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. But didn't we state that Rav Nachman said, Yisomim Shabo Achok B'nefsei Aviyan? Let's say the heirs are coming to divide up the estate of their father, Bezdin and their orphan and their minors. Bezdin Mamino and Apotropos. The court appoints executors for each of the heirs. And they give them a nice portion. Higdila, once the heirs become adults, then the heirs can object and say, we don't like what you did for us. Rav Nachman himself says, once the children get to be adults, they're not able to object because Imkei Makoch Bezin Yafa. We see from here that Rav Nachman does hold by this principle of Imkei Makoch Bezin Yafa. So why do we say he doesn't? Gemara says, Lo Kasha, it's not a difficulty. It depends whether or not they actually made a mistake. If the executors didn't make a mistake, then they actually cannot object to it. But where they made a mistake, then they can object. So that's the case. Where they made a mistake, they can object. Where they didn't make a mistake, then they can't object. Because then came back off Bezin Yafa. So the Gemara says, if they didn't make a mistake, then what are they objecting to? How are they able to object to beruchos? They don't like the place where they were given the property. They said it would have been better for us if we had a different property. It was closer to our other lands. So that it wasn't a mistake, but they just objected to the direction in which they were placed. So the Gemara says, Ke'asa Rav Dimi, where Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Amar Ma'isa v'asa Rebbe k'divrei Chachamim. He said there was an incident, Rebbe ruled like the Chachamim, i.e., where the mistake was greater than this, it was 6th or greater, and he canceled the transaction of the Bezdin. Amar Lafanav Pirta ben Osher Rabbi Elazar ben Pirta ben Osher Rabbi Prat Gadol came Makoch Bezin Yafa. So Pirta says, well, if that's the case, what about Makoch Bezin Yafa? Well, you've taken away all the power of the court. And Rabbi said, you know what? Rabbi ruled. He reversed himself and he said the transaction stands like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav Dimi Masni Hachi, that's how Rav Dimi said the story took place. But Rav Safra Masni Hachi, Rav Safra said the story took place like this. Ma'aseh Bikesh Rabbi Lasos K'divrei Chachamim. There was an incident and Rabbi wanted to paskin like the Chachamim and thereby cancel the transaction. Amar Fana Pirta ben Osher Belazar ben Pirta ben Osher Pirta Gadol. Him came back off Bezin Yafa. So he says, if that's the case, what's the power of the court? So, and then when Rebbe heard this, so also Rebbe has a Ma'aser. Rebbe didn't actually do the Ma'aser then. So in this case, Rebbe just intended to do it, but he didn't actually do it. So the Gemara says, "Lema balkan lifugay." Isn't what's the dispute about? Mar savar tabed var mishnah choser. Aren't some of the opinion? It must be that Rav Dimi was of the opinion that if the court makes a mistake about a matter that was explicit Mishnaic law, which is that the law here should be like Reb Shimon Gamliel because he gives his svara, because Rashi says nasan Talmud bar. If he explained his reasoning, so if you make a mistake, tabed var mishnah, you can reverse it. Umar Savar, whereas Rav Safar says Eino Choser, he wouldn't have been able to reverse it, and Rebbe would have had to pay the mistake on his own, and that's why it says that Rebbe just thought to do it, but he didn't actually give the ruling. But if he had given the ruling, he wouldn't be able to reverse it. Lord says, no, that's not what's going on here. Everybody says if the court makes a ruling about a Dvar Mishnah and it's wrong about a black letter law, about explicit case of the Mishnah, then indeed you can reverse it. That's not what's going on here. What's going on here is they're just arguing about what actually happened. It's not a deeper argument. So Amar Rav Yosef, our Malta. So Rav Yosef says, our Malta de Zabina. Let's say there's a widow comes along and sells her property to cover her estate, so she could collect her ksuba. The heirs are responsible. The heirs are the ones who give the guarantee on the property. If the property was discovered that it was stolen or there was a lien on it, and they go claim it from the person who purchased it, so then that purchaser can go back to the heirs, not to the widow. And so too, Bez and the Zabin, and let's say a court sells the property of the heirs, again, the warranty goes back to the heirs. The guarantee goes, it's on the heirs. So the Gemara says, well, Pshita, it's obvious. Obvious. They're the ones who are giving the field to pay the debt. Obviously, they're the ones who are responsible. So the Gemara says, no, you're right. We read it wrong. We don't need this ruling to teach us the case of the widow that the achrayus is on the heirs. We're being taught that even in a case of a court selling something, there is achrayus, that there is a guarantee. Mao the Tema, you might have thought, on the top of Kuf Amabeis, you might have thought, called the Zabin, the Beidina, Adai Talamepak like Kolodism. You might have thought anyone who purchases something from a court that he's buying it because he knows there's a lot of noise about it, it's a public proceeding, and so therefore there's no achrayus. So we're saying, no, there is achrayus under these circumstances. And there's still achrayus under these circumstances. And the achrayus goes on the heirs. Shimon Gamliel said, so even if the mistake is more than a sixth, the transaction is not canceled. So how far does Reb Shimon Gamliel go? If they completely, what's the extent? So Rav Yehuda, Rav Sheshes, Ad Palga, up to 50% of the cost of the property. That's how Rabbi Shimon Gamliel extends the principle that even if he sold something that was really cost 200, he sold it for 100, or the reverse, the sale is valid. But more than that, it wouldn't be. Let's say the court sells it without a proclamation first. It didn't go through the public proceedings, which you're supposed to do for 30 days before you sell a property of the heirs. Then it's like they made a fundamental error in a black letter law, and the sale is canceled. The Gemara says, what do you mean nasu? This is not it's like they made a mistake. This is a mistake. It's not shuma yisomim, like the evaluation of the property of the heirs. Before you sell it, you need to put it up for public inspection for 30 days. Vishuma hektish, and an evaluation of sacred property before you sell something to pay off a debt to the temple, or if the temple has property it's selling, it's shishim yom, it's 60 days. Umachrizim baboker b'arav, and you make the proclamation every morning and every night. Gemara said, no, if it was just from those circumstances, hanimili shaliach, I would have said that's the case as it relates to an agent of Al Bezdin, but the court I would say that I would have said that that's the case as it relates to the shliach of Bezdin law, but as it relates to the court, that which the Mishnah in Erchin requires achraza, that's only when the court sends an agent to sell it. But when the court itself sells it, I would not have said that it requires this period of achraza for 30 days. So the Gemara says, well, Esvei Rav Ashi Meimar. So Rav Ashi challenges this teaching of a Meimar. Again, a Meimar, what did a Meimar say? A Meimar said in the name of Rav Yosef that a court that sells something without achraza, it's as though they made a fundamental mistake and they go back. So Rav Ashi challenges a Meimar because we said in our Mishnah, Shuma Dayanin Shapichatu Shtus or Utsir Shtus, if you have the evaluation of the court that was less than a sixth or more than a sixth Machar Batal, then it's going to be disqualified, which means Shava B'Shava. But doesn't that mean we're in the middle of Kufa Mabeis? Doesn't that mean that if they sold it for exactly the right price, Machran Kayim, it will be valid? And my lavar, we're talking about a case in our Mishnah Delo Achriz where the court didn't make a proclamation and we're still saying the sale is valid. So isn't this a question on Meimar? So the Gemara says, no, that's not what we're talking about. But the Achriz, it's where they still made the proclamation. The Gemara says, well, if they made the proclamation, how many the Seifa b'the Achriz? Have a Reisha b'the Lo Achriz? But it can't be that it's talking about where they made the proclamation first, because the latter case is where the latter case in our Mishnah is where they made the proclamation. So that means that the former case in the Mishnah is where they didn't make the proclamation. And what's the latter case of the Mishnah? What's the latter case of the Mishnah where they made the proclamation? The Katane Seifa, and also Igeris Bikoris, that says in the latter case, if they made a proclamation, even if they sold it for 50% off, for something that was 50% more, something that was a mana, they sold for Masayim, they sold something that was for 200 for a mana, Machar and Kayim. Then we're going to say that the sale is valid. So if they did a proclamation, then even if they go, according to Rabbanan, even if they go way over, it's valid. So therefore, if that's the case, the earlier case must be where there is no proclamation, and we say it's valid. So the Gemara says, you're right. They didn't make a proclamation in the earlier case. So if that's the case, why was the sale valid? It's not difficulty. I'll tell you why. There are certain things that you're required to make hachraza for, that you're required to proclaim it publicly, and certain things that you're not required. These are the things which you're not supposed to make a proclamation about. Avadim v'metalton v'ashtaros. You don't need to make a proclamation before selling avadim, these slaves, or metalton, or movable objects, or shtaros, or these notes that you have an IOU on somebody. Why? Avadim time in mind. Why don't you have to make a proclamation before selling the avadim? Shema yishmu v'yavrichu, because we're concerned. Shema yishmu v'yavrichu. Maybe the avadim will hear that they're being sold and they'll run away. Metalton. The shtaros, the movable objects, and the shtaros, Shema Yigniv, we're concerned that maybe they're going to be stolen. Shema Yigniv, the bias, and so therefore, if you make the public scrutiny over them, it's more likely that they're going to be stolen. The bias, or alternatively, Kabasha Shemachrizin, Kabasha She'emachrizin. There are certain things which, even though in general you have to make a proclamation, there's certain things which you don't make a proclamation for them. The Amr Nardai, as Nardai said, that there are certain deals that need to get done right away. You can't submit them to public scrutiny. Like Arga for the head tax needs to be paid right away because the king's tax officers are coming through. They want their money right away. Umazoni for support, you can't if you need something for support, you can't say, we wait 30 days. You need to be paid right away. Ulgvura. And for burial, you need to be paid. You need to pay right away. You can't wait 30 days to sell the property to pay for the variable. So those cases, if that's what you're selling it, you could sell it right away without a proclamation. We buy the same, or alternatively, there are also some places where you don't need to do the public proclamation because everybody there is such an expert in the real estate that you don't need to make the proclamation. How do we know that? The Amar Rav Nachman, the Olam will also be Geras Bikoris ben Ardai. Rav Nachman said they never used to make these public proclamations in Ardai. Savar Minei, the people at first thought Mishum de Bekia Beshume, because they were experts in Ardai, so they don't need to make the proclamation. That they said that why do Rav Nachman say they don't need to make a proclamation? Because the people there are experts in Naradai, and so then therefore there's no need for it. So they don't need to do it. So I'm like Rav Yosef Bar Menyumi with the dim mefarshally minid Rav Nachman misham de Carlo b'nei achei nechsei da'achrasta. Now, what's the reason why they don't make in Naradai? They didn't make a proclamation. It's not that they were experts, but they thought that it was. Rashi says Gnai v'charpa hilahem. They thought it was an embarrassment, disrespectful that to purchase property that the court was selling, because they're saying that he's only selling it under duress, or nobody would want to buy it because he says, I don't want to buy a house from a guy who's going bankrupt, or buy it from the estate and basically strip the estate of its assets. So people didn't want to do it. They said, I don't want to be called, I don't want the reputation of being the guy who goes to buy people's houses when they're being evicted, so to speak. So that's why in Naradai they wouldn't put something up for public auction. The movables of the heirs, the movable objects of the heirs, we evaluate that and we sell it immediately. So we don't want it to rot. So right after the person dies, we sell it right away so that the property doesn't rot. He says, even though you're selling it immediately, you have to sell it in the marketplace. You can't just do a private deal. You have to offer it in the marketplace so that there's a possibility to purchase something to get a better price. And it's not an argument. It depends whether or not the marketplace is close by or far away. If it's far away, then we're going to say it's going to be difficult. But if it's close by, you sell it in the marketplace. Rav Kahana had in his possession the beer. Rav Kahana had biyadei shechra the Rav Masharsha bar chalkai yasma. So Rav Kahana had in his possession the beer of the young Rav Masharsha before he became a rabbi, while he was still a minor orphan. Shehiyah ad rigla. He waited with it until the festival. He said, "Avagav denafal beitzatzta." Even though it's going to become a little bit sour, nevertheless, ma'isi zuzeh harifa. It's going to bring in a good price because everybody needs it, and they're going to bring their money, and therefore I'm not going to sell it on credit. It's going to bring in hard cash. Ravina biyadei chamra, the Ravina zuta yasma. Ravina had in his possession wine that belonged to Ravina Zuti Yasma, the young Ravina, the orphan, Barachte, the son of his sister. So the law is Ravina himself also had the wine, and Havikamasically was Sichra, and Ravina wanted to bring the wine on the ship to a place that was called Sichra. Also, came to Rav Ashi. So he came to Rav Ashi. He said, "Malo, I'm too ba'adan. Can I take on the ship also the wine of the orphans together with my wine, or maybe I have to be concerned that maybe the ship will sink and the wine will get lost." So Rav Ashi said, "Zil lo adif mideidach. You can do this. It's not worse than your wine. You mean to say you don't have to treat it with more security than you're treating your own wine." And so that leads us up to the Mishnah. I'll stop the recording.